Farage's path to number 10, the poll that has Westminster terrified. Before we dive into what might be the most explosive political polling we've seen in modern British history, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. Trust me, you'll want to be here when this story unfolds because what I'm about to tell you will fundamentally change how you view the next election. Right? Let's get into it. Imagine waking up tomorrow morning to find Nigel Farage walking through the door of number 10, Downing Street as Prime Minister. Not as a kingmaker, not as a coalition partner, but as the outright winner with a majority that would make even Tony Blair's 1997 landslide look modest. Sound absurd, doesn't it? Well, according to a shocking new MRP poll, this isn't just possible, it's what the data is screaming at us right now. And Westminster is absolutely bricking it. The numbers are genuinely jaw-dropping. We're talking about Reform UK potentially winning 445 seats. Let that sink in for a moment. 445 seats. Labour, the party currently running the country, reduced to a pathetic 73 seats. And the Conservatives? Brace yourself. Just 7 seats. 7. That's not a political party. That's a book club. This would represent the most dramatic realignment in British political history, a complete and utter annihilation of the established order that's governed this country for over a century. Now, I know what you're thinking. Polls are just polls, right? They've been wrong before. Remember when everyone said Remain would win the Brexit referendum? Remember when Theresa May was supposedly heading for a massive majority in 2017? But here's the thing, this isn't your standard poll conducted by ringing up 1,000 people and asking them which way they're leaning. This is an MRP poll, multi-level regression, and post-stratification for those of you who enjoy tongue twisters, and it's widely regarded as the most sophisticated and accurate method we have for projecting election outcomes. This is the same methodology that correctly predicted the 2017 hung parliament when everyone else was calling it wrong. The poll surveyed 7,449 British adults, a genuinely substantial sample size, and what it reveals is nothing short of political earthquake waiting to happen. But the really fascinating bit, the part that should have every strategist in Westminster losing sleep, is what happens when you dig into the psychology behind these numbers. Because this isn't just about people fancying a change or being fed up with the current lot. This is about a fundamental breakdown in the relationship between the British public and the two parties that have dominated our politics since time immemorial. Kevin Craig, the CEO of PLMR who conducted this polling, didn't mince his words. He said this shows a remarkable fall from grace for the Conservative Party and exposes where voter priorities actually lie. Traditional party loyalties, the ones that saw families vote Labour or Tory for generations, are under unprecedented pressure. We're watching the dissolution of political tribalism that's defined British democracy for decades, and it's happening at breakneck speed. So what's driving this seismic shift? What's got the British public so furious that they are willing to hand the keys to Downing Street to Nigel Farage? Well, it's not complicated, and it's not about culture wars or abstract ideological battles. It's about something far more immediate and visceral. The economy. Stupid. Specifically, the cost of living. 59% of people listed it as their primary concern, the thing that will determine who gets their vote. That's not a plurality, that's an overwhelming majority. People are struggling to heat their homes, fill their cars, and feed their families, and they are looking at the current government and the official opposition and thinking, neither of you have a clue what to do about it. Immigration and border control came in second at 47%, which shouldn't surprise anyone who's been paying attention to British politics over the last decade. The NHS, that sacred cow of British public life, was a top concern for 44% of respondents. These aren't fringe issues or talking points dreamed up by political consultants. These are the fundamental concerns that keep ordinary people awake at night, and Reform UK is positioning itself as the only party willing to speak plainly about them. But here's where it gets really interesting, and this is the bit that might actually save the establishment from total obliteration. Around a third of those surveyed said they would vote tactically, specifically choosing the Conservatives not because they like them or trust them or think they do a good job, but purely to block Reform UK from winning seats. Tactical voting, for those unfamiliar, is when you hold your nose and vote for someone you don't really support to prevent someone you really don't want from winning. It's not exactly a ringing endorsement of British democracy, is it? But it might be the only thing standing between Nigel Farage and the keys to number 10. This tactical voting phenomenon is absolutely crucial because it introduces a massive variable into these projections. If a third of voters are willing to compromise their actual preferences to keep reform out, that could dramatically alter the outcome. But it also tells us something rather depressing about the state of British politics. We've reached a point where a significant chunk of the electorate isn't voting for what they want. They are voting against what they fear. That's not a healthy democracy. That's a defensive crouch. The poll was conducted before party conference season, which means we're looking at a snapshot of public opinion before Labour, the Conservatives, and Reform made their big pitches to the country. But what's terrifying for the established parties is that this gives them very little comfort. Because if the numbers are this catastrophic before they've even had a chance to make their case, what does that tell you about how much faith the public has in their ability to turn things around? Let's talk about the casualties, because this poll predicts an absolute bloodbath among the political elite. More than a dozen cabinet and shadow cabinet members are projected to lose their seats. We're talking about Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, gone. Ed Miliband, the Energy Secretary and former Labour leader, out on his ear. Bridget Phillipson, the Education Secretary, done. These aren't backbenchers or minor figures. These are some of the most powerful people in the country, and according to this polling, they'd all be heading to the job centre. The Conservatives fare even worse, if that's possible. Kimi Badenoch and Robert Jenrick, both currently vying for the Conservative leadership and sitting on the front bench, would lose their seats to Reform UK. Imagine that. The people who think they might lead the Conservative Party into the next election can't even hold their own constituencies. And it's not just Reform doing the damage. Wes Streeting and Yvette Cooper, two of Labour's highest-profile ministers, are projected to lose to Jeremy Corbyn's Your Party. Yes, that Jeremy Corbyn. The man Labour spent years trying to distance themselves from could end up picking off some of their biggest names. The irony is almost too perfect. Now, let's inject a bit of reality here, because as dramatic as these numbers are, we need to remember that there's no election scheduled until 2029. That's 4 years away. 4 years is an eternity in politics. 4 years ago, Boris Johnson had just won a landslide, Labour was still dealing with the aftermath of the Corbyn era, and Reform UK was nowhere near the force it is today. Things change, often rapidly and unpredictably. A week is a long time in politics, as Harold Wilson famously said, so 4 years is practically geological time. But, and this is a crucial but, the trend these numbers represent is real and it's been building for years. This isn't a temporary blip caused by a bad news cycle or ministerial scandal. This is a result of deep-seated frustration with a political class that many voters believe has failed them repeatedly. Brexit didn't deliver the promised land. The Conservatives crashed the economy and went through prime ministers like other people go through socks. And now Labour, after promising change, seems to be managing decline rather than reversing it. Kevin Craig's follow-up comments are perhaps the most important part of this entire story. He said there's a long way to go until 2029, and the message is clear. Voters want a weekly shop to cost less. It's time to forget the slogans and the clever language. Instead, the government must keep calm and focus on delivering more money into working people's pockets to shore up support ahead of the next election. This is brutally simple advice, but it's exactly what the current government seems incapable of doing. They are obsessed with narratives and messaging and strategic communications when what people actually want is to not have to choose between heating and eating. The cost of living crisis isn't an abstract economic concept. It's a daily reality for millions of British families. When petrol costs a fortune, when energy bills are astronomical, when a trip to Tesco feels like taking out a mortgage, people don't want to hear about five-pound plans or long-term economic strategies. They want immediate relief, and they want it now. Reform UK, whatever you think of their other policies, has understood this in a way that Labour and the Conservatives haven't. They are speaking directly to that pain, and according to this poll, it's resonating. So can Nigel Farage actually become Prime Minister? Based on this polling, if an election were held tomorrow, he'd walk into Downing Street with one of the largest majorities in British history. But that's a massive if. Elections aren't held tomorrow. They are held when they are scheduled, and between now and 2029, 1,000 things could change. The economy could recover, though there's precious little evidence it will. Labour could find its footing and start delivering on its promises, though they seem more interested in managing expectations and exceeding them. The Conservatives could complete their rebuilding process and present a credible alternative, though right now they can't even decide who should lead them. Oh, and this is what should genuinely terrify the establishment. None of that could happen. The economy could continue to stagnate, living standards could keep falling, immigration could remain high, the NHS could keep deteriorating, and the anger that's currently bubbling under the surface could boil over. If that happens, tactical voting might not be enough to save us from Farage premiership. People can only hold their nose and vote for the lesser of two evils for so long before they decide they'd rather burn the whole thing down. What this poll really reveals is that British politics is in a state of flux unlike anything we've seen in our lifetimes. The old certainties are gone, the traditional coalitions are fracturing, and voters are willing to take a punt on something radically different because the status quo has failed them so comprehensively. Whether that ends with Nigel Farage and number 10 remains to be seen, but the fact that it's even plausible, that serious polling is showing it as a realistic outcome, tells you everything you need to know about where we are as a country. The establishment parties have 4 years to turn this around. 4 years to convince the British public that they deserve another chance, that they can actually fix the problems that have been festering for over a decade. Based on their performance so far, you'd be forgiven for not holding your breath. But politics is a way of surprising us, and 2029 feels like it might just deliver the biggest surprise of all. That's where we are, Britain, on the edge of something genuinely unprecedented, with a very real possibility that the next election could redraw our political map entirely. If you found this analysis valuable and you want to stay ahead of the curve as this story develops, and believe me it will develop, then subscribe to UK Connors. We'll be here tracking every twist and turn because this is a story that will define the next 4 years of British politics. See you in the next one.